Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Podnets Pro. I am your host, Marvin B., and we've got another good show lined up for you today. I have with me two guests that I think you are going to find very interesting. I have Lynn Thames and Franklyn Peart. They will be on in just a minute to introduce themselves. But I do want to say first that this is the second in a series of discussions that we are going to be having on diversity and inclusion. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes here and they're going by fast, and the pictures over here are distracting. So I hope you guys are okay with that. We had our first discussion last week, got some great and positive feedback on that. Got a couple of negatives, but that's what happens. So this is going to be week 2 of those discussions, and we'll get right to it in just a second. I do have a couple of housekeeping items to do. The first thing I want to do is I want to give a big thank you to James. James was somebody who actually gave us a donation last week for some work that I did with him. Actually, I didn't do the work. James called me with a problem at a client he was having. I got him in touch with a consultant who could help him, and she took care of him and got his client up and running, and he gave me a donation for helping. So I want to say thank you to James for that. That will help pay for some of the hosting and podcasting fees that we do here. Speaking of podcast, there's going to be a couple of good ones coming up. I have a scheduled podcast with our good friends from SolarWind. They've not been on for a while. There have been some updates to SolarWind, so they're going to be on, and I will ask them how things have been going and what things they've been doing during this COVID time. And for those of you that have been waiting, there is going to be a special after-hour show with Matt Rainey. That is correct, folks. Matt Rainey is not only going to be in the house, this is going to be an after-hour special. And if you have seen the promotion for it, this is one where I'm going to ask you to get your dinner done early, get your chores done, put the kids to bed. This is going to be an adult beverage kind of evening with Matt Rainey as we share stories and tips on how you can help your small business. And one last note that I just want to say to all my friends that keep sending me Florida man stories. Yes, they have been fantastic. Yes, Rona has given us some great Florida man stories, but I haven't put anything out because, Florida is just killing it when it comes to the Rona. Of course, if you've been paying any bit of attention, Florida broke the single day record for number of new cases during this outbreak. And what could be more Florida man than that? I won't dwell on it too much because I'm sure you've seen it all over the internet. It'll be everywhere, but enjoy Florida man. So with that, let me bring in our guest here, and let's get them added here, and let's get this nonsense off the screen with the, there we go there. And I would like to welcome now into the room Lynn Thames and Franklyn Peart. Guys, how you doing?
Doing great.
All right. So
Rona free in Florida.
Rona free. That's a big thing here. It's getting to be harder and harder now. So, well, why don't we start with that and just ask Franklyn? I know kind of how you're doing because you're down the street from me, and we've been having a good go of it. Lynn, how are things for you in the land of Rona?
I am right outside of Philadelphia, and I think our numbers are going up a little, but had been trending down. We had it worse earlier on, sort of when New York was having a bad time. So
right.
We're still we still don't have restaurants open for indoor eating. There's still a lot of restrictions, but and I think that's good. but the numbers here are, we are not Florida.
We're not- That's kind of the best thing people can say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're not Florida. Franklyn, how are you doing? Like I said, I know you're down the street, and I know that we are back into heavy restrictions down here. Pretty much, if you walk outside, you need to wear a mask. But how are things for you?
You know the story. I mean, down here we're always making excuses as Floridians. So yeah, it's once again we're in a hanging Chad situation. It seems, right?
Yeah, and we'll be doing that too. Yes.
Yeah, but picking up the tail of that curve. Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and he said to me, do you know anyone who's been affected by this virus? I'm like, as a matter of fact, a couple of people, yeah. And I listed some people that I knew, including a family member who is a critical care nurse up in Virginia. And his tone was suggestive of the idea that, hey, everything's been exaggerated. I don't really know anybody who is being affected. And then he remembers, actually, my sister-in-law is a critical care nurse. And she tells me, I'm like, so I was just flabbergasted. I'm like, really, dude?
Wow. Very selective memory there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, wow.
So I've got one client that had one of their employees that was infected. They were already separated, so they don't believe it was a big deal, but obviously they weren't allowed to come back into the office. They were doing a rotation anyway, and this person hadn't been in for a couple of weeks. So I don't know exactly the extent of that story. I got a call from a client that I've been trying to fire for 2 years. And I thought that they were gone at the end of March because they called me to tell me that they had a new IT company. And I was like, great, I'll send over the documentation. See ya. Called me yesterday because they were trying to install a piece of software and needed the admin password. And I'm like, well, what happened to your new company? Oh, well, the guy that was doing it got coronavirus, and so we're not letting them do anything. So they haven't taken over yet.
Oh, wow.
Geez. Oh my God.
And I said, they can help you remotely, can't they?
Right.
She said, well, yeah. And I said, here's your password. Call them. Let them do it. But that happened. Her boss had the coronavirus, so they weren't even in the office. They were all working remotely as well. So the numbers are starting to stack up down here.
Yeah, I know I have two friends whose parents have died from it. So that has hit very close to home for me.
Wow.
So, it's real. It's real. If you want to be willfully ignorant that you don't think it's actually happening out there, I don't know what to say about that. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But
It's a different world that we are in, and we hopefully will all make it out just fine as long as we do what we know is right. Stay safe and.
Well, we listen to people with medical knowledge and that are no viruses and things.
Don't listen to Florida Man. So if you see a Florida man ranting in a store, do not listen to Florida Man.
I don't need to wear a mask. It's my freedom.
All right. Well, glad you two are both doing okay.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Now, I know that both of you have been on the show before. However, there's always somebody new that's watching or listening. So let's do this. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, and you've got pretty much open reign. So tell me what you want to know or what you want people to know, and go from there. So Lynn, you're in the middle here. So why don't you go first?
Okay. My name is Lynn Thames. My business is called Thames Computer Consulting. I run a business by myself. I do have a bookkeeper, but anyway, and I provide some break fix and a lot of sort of now it's all remote, of course, but support for small businesses, but very small businesses, generally like 5 employees or less, and I will help them with any IT related issues that they have. They pay me monthly to support them, and I do a lot of work on. I would say I'm probably 60-40, 60% Windows, 40% Mac. So I was a member of the Apple Consultants Network, but I have since let that lapse. But I do a lot of Mac clients. So my business has actually been doing fine since all this happened, with people having to work at home, whatever. I get a lot of calls, to help them. Initially, it was set up remote connection, but now it's just, all the things that happen to people's computers and issues. And I have a big cache of clients that have used me, so they continue to call me. And okay, I think that's all I have.
All right. Franklyn?
Hey, yeah, so I'm one of the founders of GladNet. We've got 2 products, CenterStack and TrioFox, and we're always looking for more partners to use us. Yeah, so our platform is really about simplifying remote access, and we do that from a little bit of a different angle, combining the file server philosophies with cloud philosophies. So having a 3-tier architecture with an orchestration layer that's equally adept, talking to file servers or clouds, which manifests itself as simplified VPN-less access into your file server, or simplified migrations to the cloud. That's the basic idea. So remote access sharing.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So Franklyn, I don't know if I talked to you before all this started or right as this was all starting, but I'm sure you guys had a big push, right? For
We did.
remote setups.
So we went home 2 weeks before because we feel, hey, this is, we should be extra careful because this is supposed to be up our alley, right, as remote access specialists. And sure enough, middle of March, our phones started ringing off the hook. Everyone was just, we got calls from Europe where the people were saying, we need to get into the cloud so fast. We don't even care about GDPR. Just get us to your cloud, wherever it is. Right. And then others who are more looking to accelerate on-prem access, right? They went from managing single networks in the office to managing. So here's a specific example. At MSP, I'm not sure if he's comfortable with you mentioning his name, but he manages around 950 endpoints. And he said, I had 50 customers. I went from managing 50 networks to 900 networks overnight. Because every time someone has a problem at home, they can't connect.
Right.
So because we have these bandwidth acceleration technologies, caching on demand, kind of dynamically building edge networks based on user activity, we reduce the dependence on that remote network. So we simplify that from a management perspective. So yeah, we've had a lot of acceleration in our business because of this, which kind of, you almost feel guilty about it. When so many people are suffering, to have your business benefiting from it. The way I look at it, though, is that we're making remote access a little bit easier, and it's so hard to work from home. We've got childcare situations. Right now, I have a friend who's a teacher, and they're debating how to go back to school. Right? Should it be all remote? Should it be hybrid? And I think the governor even announced that all schools are mandated to be open. Of course, much is left to interpretation, so it's not as bad as it sounds. But what a Florida move. Anyway, so whatever, man. But the schools are still trying to be pragmatic about it. They're bringing in the health professionals to talk to the school boards, and they're surveying the parents and trying to really figure out the best way forward. But in all that madness, maybe we can help a little bit to streamline, how efficient you can work at home to make a little more time for that student who needs a little more attention.
Right. Yep, it's going to be interesting times.
Yep.
And Lynn, I know
what more do you need, man?
But just think, this fall, it's going to actually be chaos because we're going to have people that are going to be ready to get back to normal. Parents are going to want get their kids out of the house and make them somebody else's responsibility. They're going to, they're going to want to do those things, but yet some schools, are probably going to have restrictions that are a little too tight. Some schools may not open, some will. It is going to be fun, let's just say.
Yeah.
So, All right.
Isn't it interesting though that we're on a diversity podcast,
Yeah.
and we're talking about things that are just like human interest, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a matter of education, taking care of our families, the economy, all these things that are sort of supposedly colorless, right? So it's interesting.
And they are.
Yeah.
And they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, colorless is an interesting term
Well, yeah, okay. Right. I understand. Right. And they are
because
in the yeah. I meant in the sense that everyone, no, people have the same interests at heart, taking care of their children or getting rid of their children, whatever the case may be. But that's what's colorless, not the
right.
not your resources, obviously, or not.
Right.
Yeah.
The way I like to say it is crazy doesn't know color.
Right.
Right.
Many things don't.
Yeah. So, well, let's do this rather than dig right into, each of our stories and what we think about it. We've had some very interesting news stories in the last few days.
Mm.
And I don't know if you had a chance to see the stories or dig into them, but Twitter is having a couple of fun days with being accused of anti-Semitism. And Lynn, this may fall into your wheelhouse. Did you hear that story? Do you know what's going on there, or what do you think?
I didn't hear the story until you sent me that link, and I'm on Twitter, but I don't know. I'm not on it all day, But anyway, well, I'm not surprised. I mean, that's sort of like another thing that never goes away. I'm Jewish, by the way, so that's probably why I feel like I can speak to this. I mean, I'm totally not surprised. The only thing that I can say is I'm happy if it's called out, and I would be happy to see Twitter, accounts that are being blatantly anti-Semitic. I would like them to get rid of them. I get very it's very hard because people argue it's free speech. What is free speech? The ability, you're allowed to say things without going to jail, but you're not allowed to not have consequences for what you say. I think to me, that's what the First Amendment and free speech is about, right? You can say things that are abhorrent without being arrested, but you might receive some consequences for it. I was thinking this is not related to anti-Semitism. What was the recent thing? Wait a minute, it just went out of my head. The recent thing.
Which one? There's been so many.
I know. The thing with the Goya, the CEO of Goya Foods. Did you hear about that?
I glanced over that one. Go ahead and help us out.
He didn't actually say anything. Actually, this might not be the forum for this podcast. He actually said something political. He spoke with at a Trump press conference or something, and praised the president. And a lot of Hispanic people, said we're not going to buy your product anymore because of that. So there was a whole argument about free speech, and the issue becomes he can say what he wants. He's allowed to say what he wants, and he's allowed to believe what he wants. But I am also allowed to not buy your product because of it. Absolutely. So there has to be a consequence. That's the consequence for him to say that. And if he's willing to step into that arena, I'm also allowed to vote with my money, and say I'm not going to buy your product. So that was the latest argument I saw on Twitter. I didn't see the whole anti-Semitic thing, but. Yeah, so what else? As far as the anti-Semitism, I'm like, yeah, so what else is there?
Well, it's funny because you're right. The internet was supposed to be the land of free speech.
Right.
That didn't follow the laws of the land, but it's getting to the point where it's so intertwined in our society. We can't just let it be the wild, wild west. Right. Can you have private groups and say what you want to say? Yeah, but if it's in public, the public can respond. That's how I see it. Franklyn, were you going to add something in there?
Nothing of value, I'm sure. No. No, I totally agree with Lynn. I mean, you're free to create a bad product, but your business will fail.
Right.
It's simple as that. Really.
Right.
Right. So why should it be any different with content?
Okay.
Right, and I think what the internet has proven to me, at least, everybody now has a voice. You know, everyone, you're reading everybody's opinion on Twitter, or whatever, and you know what? I realize some people, I don't want to know their opinion. There's some people that maybe shouldn't have it. Their opinion shouldn't be public. They should be left to standing on a soapbox on the middle of a street somewhere, and everybody walk by and go, "Oh, look at that crazy person." You know, that's kind of what they sound like to me.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
you're right. I mean, the internet's giving everyone a voice, and it's also creating these echo chambers, right?
Right.
So you tend to hear the things that you'd like to hear, which is unfortunate. And so, you used to visibility and the right to be audible used to be dependent on the value of your content, the quality of your content, because you wouldn't get a soapbox unless you had something really strong to say, because there were gatekeepers. And now there are no gatekeepers. There's a lot, but there's a lot of noise, right? And so the mechanisms have to find a way to deliver content that's relevant to you, and we know how that works, right?
Right.
And it becomes sort of self-reinforcing, and reduces the prevalence of dialogue. We just all sort of echo, like-minded tidbits instead of really exploring the difficult conversations.
So I know that a lot of people always want to get into, free speech on the internet, and should the government or should anybody be forcing Facebook, Twitter, all of them to filter or, in a sense, censor what can and cannot be said? Do you guys follow any of those discussions? Do you have any thoughts on that? What do you think?
Here's where it's so complicated. Everything is so complicated. But this is the way I always look at it. Like when you see, people that think the Earth is flat. I like to always make this analogy. Like the Earth is not flat. You can believe it's flat, but do I really need to give you a voice and to listen to you expound on why you think the Earth is flat? The Earth isn't flat. Like that's a fact, and that is not true. So in that, I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, but I'm trying to make the analogy. Like, does everybody have a voice? Is every opinion worthy of hearing by everybody? I guess I don't know who would control that though. That's the issue I think you're bringing up. Should Facebook control that or Twitter? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a tough question, right? The role of government, right? So we can talk about, so there's one question: should everyone have a voice? But then, and what should that voice sound like? And when should you get a public platform? And how much effort do we need to invest in protecting, the public eyes? Well, let's look at television as an example. We're not without examples, right? There's a rating system. So at least you can know, all right, so you can watch what you want, but we have a rating system, right? And you know that you don't want I don't want my kids watching anything that's not G-rated, all right? I don't want you watching an MA program, right? So we've historically put systems in place to at least allow some sort of governance, right? Why should it be any different online? Right. I mean, even just following that without having to ask these new existential. I shouldn't say existential, but making it sound like we've gone to get this fundamental political debate. I mean, what have we done in the past? Why is this different now?
Good question.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean,
because we did. Every television program has to have some sort of rating.
Yeah.
Unless you're on one of the private. I don't even know. See, I can't remember now what's cable, what's network, and what's regulated and what's not, because some of the channels don't have to, but most do.
Right.
But I think that there probably should be something in terms of internet, and I know that Google and Firefox have tried to come up with their, I think Google calls it safe search, where you can filter out certain kind of like content filtering, filter out the sex and the nudity and all of that for the kids and stuff. But problem is the kids are the ones that can figure out how to turn it back on the fastest.
Get around it, right?
Well,
So speaking of free speech, so Lynn, you had mentioned a CEO over the weekend. There was another CEO that ran into some trouble. And I don't know if he's really a CEO because it sounds like his company hasn't quite taken off yet. But the gentleman in, I think it's San Francisco, the company's called Solid 8, and he was out to dinner, and the videos went hugely viral.
Yeah, I saw that.
And he was yelling and screaming at this Asian family in public, and they threw him out of the restaurant, and he took a huge hit and basically resigned from his company, had to take all of his social media pages down. And, that's where I think freedom of speech is interesting, because that restaurant was very quick to let him know that his actions were infringing upon the atmosphere of other people, and they threw him out. But I think what's more interesting is how after the fact, his apology was kind of like, well, that's not how I was raised. That wasn't, I was taught to respect people. And my whole thought was, well, if that's what you were taught, why isn't that what you're doing? And alcohol had a little role in it. And I don't think alcohol filters out the beliefs. Whatever you believe is what's going to come out when you're under the influence for the most part. So that was an interesting little exchange. Did you guys get a chance to see that or
I saw it.
Look at that?
I saw it when it happened. It was terrible what he said, and then what happens when it goes viral is people try and dox him. Who is he? And they outed him as the CEO of this company, and then then it went from there. I heard it was terrible what he said.
Yeah.
That I can't make any excuses for what he said at all.
Well, it was interesting. One of the comments that I got from doing this, for the most part, I'm getting, good positive comments with, hey, glad you're doing this. Somebody needs to do it, yada, yada, yada. But then there's always the people, well, what does that have to do with tech? And I'm like, folks, tech is just like anything else in the world. We are people, and we are involved in regular life. So we're going to have to deal with these things. And here's a perfect example. The head of a tech company went ballistic, and it happens more than people really want to admit, because how many times do we hear of stories where technicians are feeling like they're discriminated against because, the management, makes a comment behind closed doors, or they allow for stuff to happen. This stuff exists in tech too, which is one of the reasons why I felt somehow we need to start talking about this openly and honestly. And, don't know how far we'll go, but thank you guys for coming on and being willing to talk about it. But those are the types of things that we need to address somehow.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of gone off topic, but maybe we should talk about. I think Marvin, I heard your podcast where you talked about your experiences. I don't know, Franklyn, if you've had experiences, feeling like you're being discriminated against, or.
I mean, because I'm bald, or?
Yeah, because you're bald. Yeah. Because that's the thing.
That's why I leave just a little bit. I can't go all the way.
So where are we starting here?
I don't know. I
don't know, Franklyn. Yeah, what I guess. Yeah. And here's the thing: I've never come out and asked you. I see that you're dark, I assume that you're black, but I have a tendency to also realize that down here, we have, are you American black? Are you island black? Is there a difference? I mean, there's.
Oh wow! I'll put our heads closer together. Let's see. Is there a difference?
just do the paper bag test. That's all.
So I'll tell you an anecdote. So I was a pretty successful engineer at Citrix for a while. Pretty well respected as an engineer there. A couple of patents and all that. So in a bit of a technical leadership position. And I worked at Leeds there. We're all friends. We standard kind of startup mentality. I was there early, stayed there for 10, 11 years. It was like a little family. It was really a lot of fun. And I remember one day I was talking to one of my buddies. And I was leaving on his office door. Just, BSing end of the day, whatever, talking about, we'd gone through a really heavy test cycle and all that. And we just finished releasing a product and we're just chit-chatting, unwinding. I don't remember what we're talking about, but I remember his comment. I won't say his name. And if you're listening, buddy, it's all good. And his comment was, well, I mean, Franklyn, you're not really black. I'm like, what? What does that mean? You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know. I look like to me. Right. But I think that I found the comment very interesting. Nice guy, right? I mean, but for whatever reason, his perception of me didn't correlate with, his concept of what a black person was supposed to be, apparently, is how I interpret it, right? Which was a little bit unfortunate, right? Yeah. Now, for me, you asked us earlier about, growing up in Jamaica as an American. It's a little bit different, right? So some people say that the island blacks aren't as sensitive to social injustice because things were different, more about kind of class type of system in the islands. Maybe, I don't know. But that comment, surprises me, right? And that's what I am kind of a little bit grateful for the current climate, because those kinds of things would now be less surprising. So in a sense, some of the things that we're seeing now, Black Lives Matter movement and all that, it's kind of a wake-up call. It's kind of even with anti-Semitism. I was at a Jewish friend that I play tennis with, and we've talked about all sorts of things, politics and the family as a fundamental unit of society and all that. And he's really burdened with the current situation. And we talked about, he mentioned just how oppressed Jewish people have been. The Jewish community is shrinking everywhere in the world, right? As in Lynn, I'm sure you're quite aware, right? There's there are two big communities, Israel and the U.S. Yeah, and everywhere else, Jewish population either not practicing or they're leaving, whatever. And that's pretty quiet. Not a lot of people are talking about that. So I think that the side effect of some of the what I would call craziness that we're seeing is bringing to the fore, what's been a bit of an underbelly and a little bit hidden, and I thought less prevalent than it actually is.
Oh, you thought it was less prevalent? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we know that, for example, racism exists, right? Everyone knows that. Right. But I thought we were further along than we actually seem to be. Yeah. I thought we were much further along.
Yeah. I'm going to speak as a white person now, and for me, the advent of the cell phone video camera has probably been the single most thing that has awoken me to the fact that this type of stuff has been going on, especially with the videos of the police mistreating Black people. I guess I had hear it, and then there were things in the past like the Rodney King beating and there was another one. Anyway, there's so many. But um, yeah, to see it over and over and over again, you really, it's very eye opening to me, and I have really, it's changed my mind. To say we were people said Obama was elected, we're post racist now. We're clearly way not, way not. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard on the Young Turks, I think it was, they were interviewing a Trump supporter, and his opinion was that, or his statements were that, the whole world was laughing at us 4 years ago. Now they can respect us again. That was his comment.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
But there's some,
Complete opposite. Yeah.
yeah, there's some parallels between, I think, the Rona stuff we're seeing and what you just mentioned, or things related to what you just mentioned, because we're so busy and we're so there's so much going on in our lives that we don't have time. I personally don't have time or bandwidth to focus on everything, right? And some things I kind of push them aside, right? And I think there's a tendency for us when faced with stress to manage it by kind of compartmentalizing, right? And so the coronavirus is happening to somebody else. I don't need to wear a mask. It's not real. If I can do that, I can move on with my life and not be so responsible or so hampered down by worry or whatever else it is, right? Sometimes I think, we may have that tendency with things like racism too, or poverty, hunger, whatever, right? That if it's somebody else's problem, if it's not in my face, then I can keep doing what I'm doing and not have to worry about that too much. I don't have to take responsibility as that good person who's not doing what they should be, right? But so I think that it's a tall order, but we have a lot of civic and social responsibility as individuals to our fellow man, and that doesn't end with race or religion or anything else. It's just sort of where we started, right? Just the fundamental need. People have a right for their fundamental needs to be met as much as we can reasonably do so, right? Whether that's feeding them, respecting them, offering them equality, etc. Right? And we have unfortunately a pattern of apathy as human beings in our effort. I don't think it's that we're evil people. It's just our effort to cope and exist and deal with what we need to deal with personally.
I think too, and I agree. I totally agree with you. And I also think that in this country there is our history has been one of individualism, and we're not socially minded. There's a lot of thought. A lot of people think, I'm here for me and my family, and everybody else is on their own. They're for, they have to take care of themselves. I'm here. There's a lot of individualism, which has been like a banner, a badge that Americans carry. We're individuals, and that I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. I think we're more, and especially this virus, as you said, has pointed that out. We're all kind of in this together, and we need to care about other people as well as ourselves to make it a better country. I think so. I don't know. I don't have the answers though. I don't know how to do it. That's where I get. I feel like it's an overwhelming issue. I don't know how to even begin to deal with it.
Right. So, Lynn, let me ask you a question. So,
Yeah.
as a female and as a Jew in the tech community, there's probably visual things that people say and do to you because you're a woman, but do you get any of it for being Jewish?
No. So here's the thing. I grew up, my last name now is not Jewish. My maiden name, which was Rappaport, was not necessarily Jewish. So, and I don't look Jewish. I don't know what, so I have had more issues, and the things that, if I look back on my life, the things that I regret would be things where I heard comments, anti-Semitic comments or jokes, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to rock the boat or stand out, or it's not people didn't necessarily know I was Jewish, so they would make a comment and I didn't say anything. And it's when I was younger. Now I would say something, and I regret that. So no, as a tech, no, I have never had any issues being Jewish. It has never come up. But as a woman, especially when I was younger, I felt that I was disrespected by some of the men that I met and worked with. They discounted me. Um, but again, that's when I was younger and I wasn't not as confident to stand up for myself as I feel like I am now. But I really do feel it for me. It's less of an issue, and I find actually it's to my benefit. I have there's a lot of women-led businesses around, and they would much rather deal with me than a guy tech. So that has been to my advantage.
Hmm.
And Franklyn, you're in a different position than us. We're technicians working in the field with, end users per se, for you in the tech industry, I'm not quite sure if I can ask the right question as to your exposure, because do you have situations where you're dealing with people that expect anything differently? Like you mentioned that, people saying, well, you're not really black. Do you have any of those types of interactions where you have to worry about your color, getting in the way of a deal or anything like that?
I haven't experienced that, no. And we're lucky we have a very diverse organization. So I've been fortunate so far that I've never seen any behavior that I could attribute to being disadvantaged.
Okay.
So no, I don't think so. I would though like to go back to Lynn said something that provoked some thought. What can I do as an individual, right? And I mean, it's a frustrating feeling that I think we all have, right? But you then went on to talk about individualism, right? And how we tend to not think of the whole organism. And it got me to thinking that perhaps that feeling of powerlessness is a side effect of our individualistic viewpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we see ourselves as individuals, then we look to ourselves to have the power individually to make the change, right? But if we see ourselves as just a cell, a unit, right, in a larger organism, then all we do is hold ourselves accountable for our cellular behavior, right? And trust that the rest of the organism will do the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like our individualism gives us an out, an excuse, right? Well, you know what? I don't have the power. I'm not Superman. I'm not president. What can I do? What does my vote matter, right? As opposed to, as a functioning member of this organism, what am I accountable for? And if everyone does that, what I'm doing, I'll do my part and trust everyone's doing theirs, right? So, it's not meant to be a criticism. I'm just noticing the juxtaposition, and that thought popped into my head that, maybe these are two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah.
And if we hold ourselves and the cells around us accountable to behave, look at, I think we all got shamed into recycling, right? So everyone does it, right? Everyone pulls out the recycle bin every day, and no one's worrying about, is the guy in Philadelphia or the guy in Florida recycling? We just do a part, right? So I think that's the key, to not feel helpless, to really feel that we matter as individuals because we're plugged into the whole.
Right. No, that's a good point. Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that helped me get to this point in terms of what can I do, I realized that a lot of my friends did not make the connection that I could have experiences like they were seeing on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as you said, Franklyn, there were people that literally would look at me and, well, you're not black. You listen to country music, or you don't sound black, or you don't act black. And you know what? That doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm black.
Right.
And I do have those experiences. So I think sheltering people from my personal life has an impact, because I've had countless conversations over the last 3 weeks, of trying to explain to people what's going on, because a lot of them really, because they didn't see it on TV and they didn't see it from me in a lot of cases, and I'm not going to say all because it's kind of ridiculous to think so, but for the most part, I may have been the biggest interaction with a Black person that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't see me as Black. So a lot of my time has been spent explaining that and what does that mean for me, and to get them to realize, look, you see things happening, and I've had the sense, like Lynn, you made the comment about being in a room and somebody makes a joke and then not saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the same thing where, I've seen somebody make a comment about another Black person,
right,
and I didn't correct them. Well,
right.
I'm correcting them now.
Yeah, right. Same with me. Right.
Because they felt comfortable enough for me to do that to somebody else. And I'm like, that shouldn't be the case.
Right.
So it's an educational process of just saying, look, this is how it is. It's also an educational process of what can each of us do individually. And, the biggest thing is for me is if you see something, say something. Even as a white person or a person not of color, if there's injustice going on, speak up. That's probably in some ways it's easy. I know in some ways it's hard.
Right.
But collectively, as you said, Franklyn, the more people feel like they can step up and say something, the more things will start to change.
Yeah, I strongly believe that we give away our power a lot. My daughter is going off to college. And, we went through all these conversations. Why does it matter? Why should I bother? Look at the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's possible? And some schools came down here to present. And it sounded like those were impossible achievements, all these big Ivy League schools and all that. So she picked kind of a safe choice, right? So I took her for a trip last year. And we went to tour a bunch of these schools, right? We went to Princeton, Yale, Columbia, whatever, right? All these big schools. And we just walked around the campus and talked to the people just to make it real. Like, this isn't another planet. It's not another universe. It is just a place with doors and concrete and grass and toilets and all the rest of it. So let them tell you no. Don't take your power away, right? And she came back and she applied to like 15 schools, right? And some said no. But she got into several schools that people, she got into Yale and Princeton and Columbia and Duke, So, and Harvard said no, and Dartmouth said no, and Brown said no. And if she had just picked one of those, she might have had a no. But because she really went for it, right, she got a lot of positive responses. Mm-hmm. And my point, other than self-promotion, I'll spell my daughter, is that a lot of times we're afraid to get the no. We're afraid to fail. We're afraid that we don't have the power we need, right? And we give our power away because we don't even try, right? And I think that I've seen so many times in my life, there's a zillion examples I can think of, building this business, right? I mean, it's a self-funded business that's now serving millions of people around the world, 60 different countries, thousands of customers, right? It's not supposed to happen. Right. And we did it one customer at a time, one relationship at a time over the years, just slow going over and over again. Like, oh, we don't know what's possible. Let's try this, see what happens. Right. And a lot of people won't do that. Right. We're afraid. We learn to walk by failing, and it's not a problem. We have that diaper padding. We walk around, we fumble around, we do our thing, and we're not afraid to fail. And somehow we learn as we grow up that we're supposed to be perfect. Right. And we're not supposed to make mistakes. But I think we got to get rid of that mentality collectively and to really go for it, right? And that even goes to these kind of social things, right? Yes, I do matter. My opinion matters. My voice matters. My vote matters. Yeah.
All right.
Well, congratulations. What school did she pick?
Princeton.
Great. Welcome to the Northeast.
Does she know that there's snow up there?
Yeah.
She does.
Okay.
does. She does.
Oh, you're gonna have to get a second closet for coats.
They said pack light. Throw the time. Like, huh? What? How?
Yeah, not in February.
Yeah.
Not in February.
All right. Well, I want to go ahead and start rounding up, but if there's anything that we left out, or if there was a point you wrote down and wanted to get to, we can certainly get back to that. But I want to give us the opportunity to kind of, summarize our discussion today and talk about, what is it that we, hope to accomplish? What do we want people to walk away with from our discussion here? You guys have any thoughts on that? Franklyn, you just probably went through a bunch of that in the last few minutes. Lynn, anything that you want to make sure that people take away?
I guess the only thing that I was thinking of is that lately I have been trying to read and listen to podcasts more about what Black people have experienced in this country, to try and learn for myself. It's very removed from my experience. I can't pretend to know what growing up being Black is like. I can hide being Jewish. Not that I do, but you can, So it's very different. So I'm trying to educate myself to help me understand better. And I would ask that that's a great thing for people to do, because it definitely is, it's eye-opening. And there's a lot of resources out there, books and podcasts and all kinds of things, articles. So that would be the only thing that I would want to leave people with, to maybe try and learn more about the experience.
All right. Anything else, Franklyn, that you thought of beyond what you mentioned earlier?
No, I think, it's just, we're all in this together. We're on this piece of rock hurtling through space, and it's not about our isms or itties. We're in this together, and why can't we just remember that?
I don't know. Good point. I don't know.
I can tell you it gets hard for us. All three of us are trying to run our business and do our deal and be with our families. And it sometimes at the end of the day, it's just, shut the doors. I don't need to see the rest of the world for a little bit.
Right.
But I know that that is something that I'm doing. I'm doing this series here in the tech community. I'm also hosting some personal ones with some friends of mine that we're doing. We may open that up. And, I was going to say, Lynn, that, if you need more resources, I can point you in the right direction. But we'll see how our first one is tonight. We'll see how that goes, see how my stamina holds up here. It's been interesting the last 3 weeks to be doing this day after day. But
I think it's great, though, Marvin. I just want to say, I want to thank you for doing this. I think this is great.
All right.
Indeed.
So, Lynn, Franklyn, I want to thank you both for coming on and being a part of this. And hopefully your words hit somebody out there, and some things will start to change. For those of you that are either watching the live broadcast, rebroadcast, or are listening on the podcast through the Audible, if you want to continue the conversation or join us, just be sure to send me an email, marvin@podnuts.com. You can also continue to follow us on YouTube. We've got the YouTube channel. Just look for Podnuts Pro there. There's also a Facebook group, Podnuts Pro as well, where we stream these live videos, and we'll stream the rest of our podcasts that are live. So won't always be about diversity. And if you go back to the beginning of the show, we've got Late Night with Matt Rainey coming up this Wednesday evening. So you can download or listen to the show at podnuts.com. You can subscribe in your favorite podcatcher. We are in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the places there. And other ways, like I mentioned, you can follow us on Twitter at PodnutsPro, and again on the Facebook. And I do want to thank Lynn Thames and Franklyn Peart again for joining me today. That's going to do it for this episode of Podnuts Pro. And until next time, holla.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Peace and love.